So thank you very much for the privilege, the opportunity to join the discussions. So today I will spend the next 15 minutes talking about challenges in vaccine development, clinical perspective. So my background is biomedical sciences and international relations and diplomacy with a specialization in global health and security in the African region. So I bring those two into play because I believe they are related. They sort of intersect. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so I will take a look at the countries most impacted by HIV/AIDS. Where are the clinical trial sites for vaccine research in Africa? What is the current state of HIV vaccine development? Who are the top funders? The burden of disease versus resources. This is called the 1090 gap. And then we'll take a look at the challenges and then proposed solutions. So here, this slide shows the top 8 countries affected by HIV/AIDS. They account for 57% of new HIV infections. And I know this was in 2013. And I believe that I think the picture has slightly changed, but still looking the same. So the most important takeaway here is 5 of these 8 countries are in Africa. So we have South Africa, Nigeria, Uganda, Mozambique, and Kenya. And now take a look at where the clinical trial sites are located in Africa, because this is part of capacity building. This is the biggest issue, is about capacity building. Where do we currently have capacity? For example, in HIV vaccine clinical trials, I was privileged at the time to be working for International AIDS Vaccine Initiative, and I was part of the team that helped in the early phases of developing the UVRI site in Uganda, Kavi in Kenya. I did a little bit of work at Emory in Zambia. We also coordinated with South Africa and Rwanda. So as you can see from this slide, 5 of those countries that are listed as contributing to 57% of new infections, Nigeria is missing from this map. Mozambique, you'll see it coming through the HBTN. So that's the most, I want you to pay attention to where the gaps are. Okay, so HIV vaccine clinical trials to date. These are the clinical trials we've had in vaccine research. To date, again, unfortunately, we have not had an efficacious vaccine, but the most important thing to look at here is where is the location of these studies. Again, you can see only one country in Africa is represented, and that is South Africa. Next slide, please. So with that, I would like to focus in on South Africa, because when you're sitting in the United States or in Europe for pharmaceutical companies, when they're planning out their strategy for developing drugs, and they're looking at where to actually open the clinical trials, the only country that actually pops up is South Africa. So at least the good thing is that South Africa is already a model that could be developed for other African countries. So here, this slide actually comes from Glenda Gray and her team. This was published in the Current Opinion in Virology, just showing what their pathway is to having a preventive vaccine licensed in South Africa. So as you can see, all these studies were conducted in South Africa or in Thailand. South African sites were also included here. So, okay, so here is the most current big study, HBTN 705, that produced results recently, February actually. Again, unfortunately, the study that was commonly known as Mbogoto did not show efficacy. But the most important thing here for us to look at is which countries were actually part of this study. So as you can see, we have Zambia, we have Mozambique, South Africa. So we don't have any other African countries here other than these three. Again, this is just showing how advanced the South African team is. They already have a path towards a novel vaccine, and this is what it looks like. Again, I've put these here just to show that we already have a model in South Africa that could be shared with other African countries if there is willingness to develop that. I think we already have a model we could partner with, and this is one. Okay, so now who funds the vaccine research? This question is very important because you pay for what you get. That's the principle, unfortunately, that operates in this world and is still very true for HIV funding. So as you can see here, you have mainly European donors, the US, UK represented here. There is no African government or donor that's funding the HIV vaccine research. This is very important because this is an issue, it's a question of ownership. So once they've funded the vaccine research, they have the upper hand, in making decisions of where they want to go, which countries they want to choose for actually testing these vaccines. When it comes to data protocol writing, or writing the actual protocol, heading up the clinical operations, data analysis, these are all skills that Africa requires. But if we don't have the upper hand in terms of funding, it's very difficult to get those positions. And this is part of building capacity for research. Okay, so as you know, we have the 1090 gap, and this is a concept that was actually coined by the WHO. They've been having meetings to discuss how to close this gap from 2002. I had an opportunity to attend one of their meetings in Arusha, Tanzania. So the discussion there was, less than 10% of global health research funding is targeted at health problems of greatest concern to people in developing countries. So we account for 90% of the global disease, but we have 10% global funding. So the funding part, we need to actually increase the 10%. And so just food for thought, just think about, this is the biggest shift I think Africa needs to make in terms of thinking about, when we say we want to get things done, these things need money. So where is the money going to come from? And I know we usually think about government, but I think we have to sort of begin to think outside the box and think about other creative ways of funding research. Okay, so basically I would just, I think Dr. Sheffer did a very good job at talking about the scientific challenges. And I just wanted to sort of point out the three that are still an issue. So lack of an ideal animal model, lack of correlates of protective immunity, the hypervariability issue. These are still scientific challenges that HIV vaccine research is facing. Okay, so because I have spent over 20 years in the clinical operations of drug development, coming to HIV vaccines, I see these as the challenges. So we lack a robust, I'll say Africa lacks a robust integrated scientific regulatory authorities. So South Africa has SAPRA, but is SAPRA, for example, in West Africa, is that integrated with West Africa or East Africa, etc., or is that just in South Africa? We have very few ethics committees trained in clinical research at universities and hospitals and the community at large. And again, South Africa is different in the sense that it has a lot of experience because I've worked there, and so it does have all of these. It has a scientific regulatory authority, yes, but not integrated very well into Africa. It has ethics committees, but again, these are not integrated into the larger Africa. Third is medical doctors, scientists, education curriculum. Most physicians that I worked with in clinical research in HIV in Africa had never been taught clinical research when they were students. And so they were actually learning this for the first time. Of course, it took a lot of time. And I think that if we're talking about building capacity, we will do well to actually integrate clinical research as part of the curriculum for physicians and scientists in general. And then the next point is evidence-based healthcare. For example, in the United States, I guess even in other countries in the UK, they practice evidence-based healthcare, which means hospitals continue to carry out research. And so the physicians that work there understand that they get practice, but also it goes into feeding a policy on different aspects of disease, socioeconomic issues, etc. Because it's continuing, you actually get your physicians practice, and they're used to actually understanding the impact of different medications on different populations much earlier. Last is lack of infrastructure. Again, this is talking about laboratories, hospitals with good record-keeping practices. So the proposed solutions, this is my greatest belief that we do need, Africa needs to invest in public-private partnerships to release capital for research. And then others include creating an African biotechnology industry. For me, this is a big one, because if we create an African biotechnology industry, this is about actually finding solutions to a lot of other issues other than COVID, for example, other than HIV. So here we're talking about medicines, and we would actually build capacity in research in general. We would also build capacity in bringing products to market. And because this is the most important thing, bringing the products to the market. So when, again, I once sat in a meeting and I was asking about a new study that was going to be rolled out. And when I asked about Africa, somebody said to me, but Africa is not a market. You know, and so this is the importance of Africa creating its own biotech industry, creating its own market with its own products. And then followed by incentives for vaccine industry. Again, like I said, we need to harmonize original scientific, regulatory, ethical frameworks. I mentioned evidence-based healthcare system. I mentioned curriculum, etc. So I think that I want to bring in two bodies here at a sort of top level or governmental level. These are the World Health Organization and Gavi. At one of the meetings that I attended with WHO, it had been suggested that it would be better to set up the regional vaccine safety hubs through the WHO, because they already have the structure, and also set up vaccine ethics review boards, probably in collaboration with WHO and Gavi, set up vaccine compensation funds with WHO and Gavi. And again, this is to give people confidence. You know, I know you've read about vaccine injury, but to have these mechanisms to assure the public that they are compensation funds, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so this slide, I just put it here because with COVID-19, they are talking about leveraging the HIV vaccine enterprise research. So which means they're going to go back to those sites that are already established for HIV/AIDS. And as you saw on that map, there are very few. They're not representative of Africa. There are very few sites. I would suggest that I think we actually build out more sites in Africa, especially West Africa, East Africa, and we have sort of harmonize those experiences, and hopefully COVID-19 vaccine research can run on those already established frameworks. So thank you very much for your time and for your concentration. Okay.
Right. Thank you very much, Phumla. Do we have any questions at this stage for Phumla? It's very interesting that you've given us experiences from your 20 years in HIV research, and then at the end you kind of say, no, this is actually how we can maybe utilize that experience and those resources for new pandemics, because I mean, COVID is just but one. But do we have any questions? I'm just surprised that because I know Ghana, and I know the Ghana FDA has been, quite active in vaccine, especially with Ebola. But you don't have any sites they don't have any vaccine sites in Ghana?
I think it's about who they're collaborating with. As you can see, you have to look at the bigger body. So if you are collaborating with Gavi or IAVI, it's coming under the structures that, how can I put it, have influence.
Okay. Yeah. So
But
I'm going to... Yeah.
But also, I think it's what needs to happen is integration, David. I believe that there's a lot of work going on in various countries in Africa, but for some reason it's not integrated in a way that you can actually see the whole spectrum. I believe there is a lot more work going on than what that slides show.
Okay, all right. Claudina, you have your hand up?
Yes, I think it's essential that you actually take note, Phumla, specifically on the activities of the African CDC, and specifically about utilizing COVAX, the needs around COVAX vaccines and what is actually happening. As far as I know, they've got 32 sites across Africa that's already been accredited to do clinical trials. So I'm part of the steering committee of the CONVACT group of the African CDC, where we look at how to use it, how to then build that capacity across and use your sort of more advanced sites to do the training within the rest of Africa. So I can make that information about the sites and so on available if people are interested, and also to see what we are doing within the African Union. Then on with regard to ethics, I do not agree that we need to do that under the Gavi banner. I think there's sufficient capacity already existing within Africa to look at the ethics components around vaccines. We also, I think, is essential that you start then working with your the Bioethics Council of UNESCO and so on. But not only that, if you start looking at what is essential from the FDA side, the EMA side and so on, they also offer training around the vaccine safety and around the ethics and so on. So I don't think we need to go to organizations such as Gavi. We can actually do it within Africa. We do have the expertise. We can do it. And we actually need to start show that we can stand on our own legs. Thanks.
Yes. So Claudina, I agree with you 100%. A lot of the issues we face in Africa have to do with the actual international relations model, the structure itself. Your African Union, where WHO sits, United Nations. It's about how those bodies actually influence what's happening on the ground. I totally agree with you. We do have capacity, especially in South Africa. Most of those points that I'm making about Gavi and WHO are for other countries that are not as well resourced and well structured as South Africa. So when you are in South Africa, you totally have a very different picture. If you go, for example, the DRC, you find that it's very difficult to work in some of these African countries if you don't have certain collaborations with bodies that have experience or are well, what can I say, have authority or influence. Let me just use the word influence. So yes, I agree with you that we can stand on our own two legs. That is why I'm proposing we use South Africa as a model, which means South Africa has a responsibility to lead and to collaborate with other African countries to share their experiences and help them stand up on their two legs. So thank you very much for that.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to have a discussion. Discussing from SunBio, and then I noticed that Annalyn from SADC is here. This is actually one of the things that we should, I guess, be sensitive to the fact that it's better to move forward as a region, and DRC is part of SADC. So initiatives like, training ethics in the region, because there is expertise in Zambia, for instance, and in other places that we might not be aware of. But how do we then build that out, not to be country specific, but to be regional? The other thing I want to say, and forgive me, I'm an academic, so I use academic freedom. And I think it's something that Claudina actually talked about earlier, the history of Gavi and how Gavi might actually be a stumbling block to, Africa's ability to make vaccines. And we know that because a global fund is a stumbling block, because they bring in products from elsewhere. They are not sourcing from local manufacturers. So if tomorrow somebody sets up a manufacturing site for a vaccines in, say, Mozambique, is Gavi going to suddenly wake up and buy from them? So the issue around the profitability and feasibility of vaccines is very important. And I, the fact, Phumla, I think it's something we can talk about later with your international diplomacy relations hat, to say, how is it that we can be friends with the Gavis of this world, but not be dominated by them? Yeah, okay. With that, I think I'll hand back over to Louise to introduce our next speaker.